Welcome to Family Business Diaries. I'm your host, Maria Santia Samoa, and we're back again with another exciting episode. Today, we have a special guest, and well, this happens to be our first virtual episode, so woohoo! All right, so today we have Mr. David Grammig. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself, but he's definitely one who's passionate about family business, and let's just hear from him. So, David, welcome to Family Business Diaries.
Thank you so much, Mary. Real pleasure being on the show, and yeah, quite excited to be the first of your virtual guests. So many more to come, and hopefully much more international than in the future as well.
Yay, you're special. You're number one, so that's good. All right, so I'm gonna allow you to just tell us a bit about yourself, something short, and then we'll just dive into the conversation.
Okay, something short, maybe something a little interesting that's not necessarily connected to my work. So I've got quite the colorful background. My mum is Czech, my dad is German-Italian. I was born in Germany, but left nearly 20 years ago and lived in 9 countries all in all. And in December, I'm going to move to the 10th one. I'm going to move to the UAE, to Dubai, to set up shop there.
Nice.
And quite excited about this. And that has to do with Africa, actually, because a lot of Africans, African entrepreneurs sort of have set up a domicile in the UAE, in Dubai as well. So that makes it a little bit easier for us also to sort of reach out to the investors and entrepreneurs from the continent.
Absolutely. And I think that UAE is very particular about family businesses, actually. I was at a conference maybe 2 years ago, and they had a whole family office come up. Like they seem very particular about family business. So that's a good place. And of course, an exciting place to be. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
All right. So yes, interesting background. Now, 9 countries, that's a lot. But let's connect it back to family business. How did you find yourself in this, area of family business? How did you get involved in the industry? Tell us more about
Sheer coincidence. Being at the right place at the right time. That's literally how it went. My background is actually quite different. Academically, I come from the security and diplomacy side of things. I worked in intelligence. I was a financial crime investigator.
Whoa.
So on paper, I knew what a family office was, but if I dealt with them, then more on the investigative side of things. And simply one day I sat in a cafe in Monaco, it was, next to a gentleman, and we started talking, and he told me that he was the principal of his own single family office, and we really hit it off. And 5 cappuccinos later, and 3 months later, I got an offer, and I started working as a director for international relations with that family, building relationships on their behalf in Europe and in Africa. Europe for access to early stage VC, and Africa was for their operational business out of the Gulf.
Wow. How long ago was this?
Nearly 10 years ago.
And you're still in here doing bigger things right now, right?
But going strong. Yeah.
Did you worked in a family business as well? Do you have history in family business personally?
Yeah, both sides of my family. So my dad was an entrepreneur, really started from scratch. He is a war child. He was born in 1937, so he lived through the Second World War, and lost his mother, lost his brother, grew up with nothing really, and then built up a company or several companies in the manufacturing space. So he produced leather goods, handbags, purses, and so on and so forth. Had several other businesses. And my mom's side, also very entrepreneurial. My great-grandfather, he owned several department stores. But then something called communism happened, and they lost everything in 2 waves. The government took everything away from him. Each wave of disappropriation caused him a heart attack, and the second one actually killed him.
Oh my goodness. So sorry. So sorry. Right. All right. But he stayed on, and I mean, you guys have still managed to keep the businesses going?
No, unfortunately not. So on the Czech side, they really lost everything. They were not capable of getting anything back. It was the case with the big ones, but the smaller businesses, all these documents, they suddenly disappeared. They were not recognized. So except for a bit of real estate, nothing was left. That's
Okay.
why it's so important to prepare for all sorts of eventualities.
I was gonna say, I mean, because some of these are totally out of your control, right? And then you're brought back to square one. But kudos to you for still doing something at least. I mean, and still encouraging other family businesses to put in structures and all of that. So we'll get to that side of the conversation. All right. So you said after 5 cappuccinos later, you became the director in that in that family office, and then you've moved on to do other things, right? So tell us the steps. I mean, because now you're a big man in Africa. So what is it that you're doing? Because we met in Nigeria. I mean, you came all the way. So family business is definitely something I'm passionate about, to travel all the way, be a part of the conference. So tell us what else you're doing in the family business space.
So maybe let me talk first about what I'm really passionate about. And this is networking. It's connecting people. This is my strong suit. This is my talent. This is also what I love, right? And you should do what you love. And if you do what you love, you're doing a good job. And then from there, it just the success comes automatically, and you move on. And so Africa is a bit, or my work in Africa now is a bit of the legacy of what I started on behalf of that family. Because as I said, my job was to build networks for the family. And, eventually the network grew to a size that it was very difficult even for me to keep an overview. And it's like, wow, I know so many people by now. What am I doing with that? And more approached me and said, hey, David, the whole world, we're trying to do this. We're looking to raise money here. We want to, develop business in a new geography. Can you connect us to people? And that's when I realized working just for one family is not quite enough for me. I want to be my own boss. I want to do my own thing, and I want to help families in the best possible way. And focused really on frontier and emerging markets. So my activity in Europe is partially centered around Eastern Europe and then Africa. So where there are incredible entrepreneurs, where there is a lot of wealth, where there are very smart people, but where sometimes the infrastructure doesn't live up to the expectations and the needs of the business owners, of the investors, and perhaps even where a bit of, access to knowledge and education for this very specific area is lacking. I mean, if we speak about family offices, the first conference I did in Africa was the Africa Family Office event. And very quickly, I had to change the name because I realized I'm not going to get far because there are none or hardly any, right? This is many real family offices as per the definition do you find in Africa? Maybe 20, 30. And so we changed it to the Africa Wealth Summit to cater to the needs of wealth owners and see or tell them like everyone is being heard, whether you are an entrepreneur or whether you already made the move towards becoming an investor. Maybe you even have a family office already, so we can bring all of them together. And the idea is always, and that it doesn't matter where we do it in the world, is to help families to learn from each other, right? To learn from one another, to share their stories, because if you ask a friend, for relationship advice, you ask the one who's been married successfully, happily for 30 years. You're not going to go to the eternal single, because what does he or she know about relationships? And that's the same with family business, especially when it comes to the sensitive topics like succession, like involving the next generation, how to bring up your children, in an environment of wealth. You're not going to take advice from someone who's not a wealth owner themselves because they haven't walked a mile in your shoes.
No, I certainly agree with you. I mean, I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed about, this podcast is learning from people. It's hearing the stories from people who have actually walked that road or who have experience. I think it makes a big difference. So kudos to you for this. But I think family businesses are quite conservative. So it's very difficult getting them to come out and, have these discussions or just bring them out of their their corners to have these discussions on how we can learn from each other. It's very difficult. Has that been your experience? I mean, with the summits, what has it been like? Do you have people, what's the response rate like?
I mean, first we need to define conservative in what aspect, in the way they invest, in the way they share their stories, in the way they make themselves publicly visible. You know, what's the focus?
So I guess just being open and sharing experience more than not talking even money, but just sharing their experiences or advising others or being seen as maybe a success story that others can learn from. Most people like to stay in the background and not be seen.
It depends. I've got those who seek the limelight and who are very proud, and rightly so, for what they've achieved. And they just want to share their story and they want to inspire others and have others learn from them. Traditionally, and that's my experience, this is more the first generation. You know, they said, look, I started from nothing or with very little. I had an idea and I built something. The multi-generational families, they tend to be the more conservative, closed up ones, because, you know, they date back several generations to a time where you just wouldn't speak, you know.
Yes.
But this is also changing now. So the next gens, you feel like, hey, they wanna have a purpose. They want to see purpose behind the wealth. They want to do good. They want to change the attitude towards wealth, even within the family. And for that, they need to be heard internally and externally, right? And if you have charities, for example, if you want to do good, if you want to do impact investment, if you want to, you know, support the continent or women around the globe or children and, you know, further education, I mean, you can't do this sitting in your basement and shutting yourself off from the world. Plus, it depends on the sector that you invest in. So especially if you do VC investment, for example, they're walking a fine line between protecting their privacy but necessary visibility. Because if you want to attract startups, early stage VC opportunities, you need to be visible, right? You need to be visible to these people. So you can't hide in your ivory tower.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Since we're talking about the summit, I mean, I was going to leave that to later, but I think since we're talking about it, let's just, you have one coming up in November. We're quite excited about it. It's happening in Mauritius. Do you want to tell our audience a bit more about that? I mean, I know I'm part of it, but I'll let you start and then maybe I can also chip in anything else.
Right, sure. So we've got a mini anniversary. It's the 5th one that we're doing now. Hadn't it been for COVID, then there would be 2 more, but it is what it is. Very excited to be coming back. And I'll be honest, the African one is really the toughest one, and I've done this sort of thing, you know, around the world. Because what I described, or what you asked me about, you know, how conservative are families, how open are they to share? This is really true for Africa. Africa feels like, hey, I made it despite the circumstances and not because of the circumstances. So I've got a secret sauce, you know, and me sharing exposes me to someone sort of taking advantage of that. But what is the Africa Wealth Summit? So it's a platform for family offices to come together, to learn from one another, to share their stories with each other, and to be educated. And I mean, you're there, you will participate, you will give a masterclass. And this is one of the 3 parts of the agenda. So we've got the masterclass, which is really full frontal classroom style education. So we want them, you know, to sit there like as if they were going back to uni or to school, take notes, learn from someone who teaches them something, and have like very practical advice that they can apply once they're at home. So the masterclass is 1. Number 2 is the storytelling. So where families share their stories, successes, failures. How do they deal with certain issues, with challenges? You know, what's the development of their family? And this is really, that's what I meant. This is these inspiring stories you want to hear from a peer and not from a consultant. And the 3rd part is the investment side of things, because this is also where we see it requires a bit more input. I had a chat with a lady from Nigeria. She said, do you know why so many Nigerian families co-invest alongside US or European. So I had no clue. She said, because they're not capable of doing the due diligence themselves. They don't have the capacity. They can't do due diligence on startups in their own home country, and they have others to do it for them. So that's one of the master classes, right? Investment side of things, seeing opportunities. How do you structure an investment strategy? Why do you need a strategy? How to, on the finance investment side, not consider the family business as your private purse, that you just take money out of it whenever you need it. There needs to be, a strategy behind it. And it's these things that we've got the official backing of the Ministry of Finance, which is also very important for us. And this year, we're also opening up specifically to the Gulf and the Middle East. So it happens in Mauritius, which has very strong ties to India, the largest population in the world now, a lot of wealth, traditionally close ties to Africa, Kenya, Ghana as well. I was surprised when I went to Ghana the first time, how many African Ghanaians of Indian descent I saw there, which I was not aware of before. So that makes sense. And then obviously the Gulf, has a strategic interest also in investing into Africa. And it's all sort of interconnected and related. And that's why we're doing it there.
Awesome. I mean, it's a great initiative, and kudos to you. For anybody interested, happening 13th and 14th of November in Mauritius. For more information, check out www.grammigadvisory.com. Did I get it right?
Exactly. And then there's the Africa Summit on the website.
Okay. David, we've been talking a lot, and I just want to find out, with all your experience, what if you could point out specific challenges? What do you think are the most pressing challenges with African family business? I mean, if you could choose three, what would those be for African family businesses? Or probably in general, I mean, based on all your experience around the world.
I think we had this discussion in the past, no?
Yes.
Especially when it came to succession, for example, which is definitely one. And you said, like, look, I have the impression that families in Africa, they struggle so much with succession. And then I told you, well, it's not a uniquely African problem. This is what families around the world struggle with. So definitely succession. I would say access to capital. To grow the business, to expand the business. I had this discussion at last year's conference where they said, look, we need to go to Europe or to the UAE to secure financing to expand our business because, our local African banks are not sophisticated enough. They're not daring enough. They don't lend us the money that we need to expand our business. And then I think a future-proofing in a way, and that's what you're talking about, the family business, but the family wealth even. And how do you do this? And I think, a family office is the best way and the best strategy. Set up a family office, set up a framework that ensures that the wealth that was created will now be preserved. And it's not that easy, and I see this. That's again something not unique to African family businesses or wealth owners. All too often, they feel like I made an awful lot of money. I was very successful, and now I move seamlessly from being an entrepreneur to being an investor, and whatever I touch, I turn into gold. And that's in 99% of the cases not true, right? So in the first year, a lot of them lose a lot of money because they feel like they know what they're doing, but then actually they're not. And this is really a shame because they worked very hard for all this money, and you don't want to lose that, right? You want to preserve it for yourself, for when you retire, for your family, for your kids, kids, who you know and see and growing up. It's a different thing if you talk about a fourth, fifth generation far removed from you that you will never experience, but at least the next two generations that are coming, that are following you want to make sure that they are protected financially, and that you want to protect yourself and your wealth also against all these challenges that might come up, like political turmoil. Maybe, property is taken away from you, assets and accounts are frozen. So a family office is a pretty good way of mitigating these challenges, and to invest in a way that is conservative, that is low risk, and yet, yielding the highest returns. But this needs to be done by professionals.
All right, so my next question to you is going to be about, current uncertainty in the markets and how family businesses can actually strategically adapt their, investments and operations for long-term stability. I feel like you've touched on that by saying the answer is, the family office and using professionals. Am I right? Would that be it?
Well, certainly professionals, and then diversification, right? So if most of your assets are comprised of the family business in an African country, that exposes yourself obviously to a certain risk. So all the liquid assets or the other investments that you have, you might want to have in another country, maybe even in another region altogether, to diversify, to hedge the risks. It's always difficult, if not impossible, to generalize, right? Because if we talk about Africa, we talk about a continent and not a single country. And this is coincidentally also the title of this year's conference, right? Africa, a continent, not a country, because people, even you coincidentally, right? You speak about Africa as if it was this one homogeneous place, but well, it's not, because I've been both to Ghana and Nigeria and their neighboring countries, and they're very, very different from each other, right? And then even Nigeria itself, you've got the north and the south, where there are big differences structurally, religiously, culturally. So you can't necessarily say that having an operating business in Africa is a big risk. It might be a risk in certain countries and might be a lot less risky in other countries. So it really depends on the situation, on the individual situation of the wealth owner, of the business owner, of the investor, where they're in.
Absolutely, I agree. But how do we change this narrative? How do we get family businesses to come out more? I mean, for you, you said that networking is key, right? Getting people to come out. That gives you exposure, it allows you to meet people, it allows you to just know how things are being done. So how do we change this narrative in the African sense? Well, what can we do to get people more interested in family offices and, these networking events that will get them to learn from experts, etc.? What would the advice be?
Well, I hope that any founder has the intention of ensuring the survival of their business. And that requires you to take the appropriate measures to protect what you have created. But in most cases, you can't protect this all by yourself, right? It requires some outside forces. Then when we speak about diversification, that could start with, diversifying the countries that you operate in. But then again, if you go into a neighboring country that you're not very familiar with, you need someone on the ground. You need someone who takes you by the hand in the most literal sense, who introduces you to the country, who introduces you to how business is being done there. But to find this person, you need to open up. You need to say, look, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm looking to achieve. I'm looking for a partner. I know that this whole notion of partnership, of working together with others, is not as widely spread in Africa as it is perhaps in other places, but it really should be, right? And I always tell the story of one of the earlier gatherings that I organized, and I had a gentleman from Kenya there telling his story about how they tried to expand their business into a neighboring country and how it failed. And then I asked him, so what do you think you did wrong? Why did it fail? And he started explaining, and at some point someone from the audience jumped up, interrupted, and said, look, I appreciate the fact that you failed, but the conclusions that you drew, they're still wrong. It shows me you still haven't understood the country. And they started having this conversation going forth and back. It's like we were way out of time and ran out of time. But anyways, I let them go because you could hear a pin drop. The audience was flabbergasted, right? They were completely immersed in this conversation. And a year later, the Kenyan called and said, look, I was very, very hesitant to come to a conference in the first place, and then even more to speak. And then when you said you want me to speak about my failures, I thought you were out of your mind. Anyways, I did it. But it was so helpful because this family, who then very much criticized us for still not understanding their country, we continued the conversation afterwards. We met up, and now we formed a JV. We're back in their country, but this time successfully. But we wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And we would have never dared going back on our own, right? But it's us talking about it that attracted them, that exposed us to them. And, it was obviously also this safe space. You shouldn't talk about everything just to anyone. A lot can happen, a lot can come out of it.
I mean, I agree. I agree that, some level of confidentiality is needed. You don't share everything out in the open and all that. But how do you operate in a space, right, that values privacy and discretion? So how can family businesses kind of balance the need for confidentiality with the benefits of building strong, transparent networks that drive growth? Like in this case, with the Kenyan story. Yes, on the one side, you want to be discreet, but there's also that thing of sharing and then getting the help that you need or getting that partnership. Culture plays a part in this for us, and we tend to hold back. But how do we create that fair balance? Because I think that's the solution.
I guess that's the secret sauce, right? That's a lot of listening to your counterpart, understanding where they're coming from, being very careful and slow in the moves that you make and the way you approach them. I mean, if I met you for the very first time today, I wouldn't say, hey, I need you on my panel and I want you to speak. I mean, first of all, I want to understand what the status quo is, what the challenges are. Maybe I can even lend a helping hand in the meanwhile, build trust, show them that I mean well. I typically connect families to each other as well in the run-up, just to show them like who I know and who I can connect them with, and that there is real value. And once they understand that talking to this one family was actually quite beneficial, and then they see the grander picture, and they're more willing and open to speak to others. But I must say, I know that you are you were educated in Canada, right? Canada or US?
Yes, Canada. Yeah,
Canada.
No, the US.
If you spend time in Europe, in the US, in Canada, I don't struggle with this as much as with someone who has never done business, outside the continent. If you are, and then you are a next gen, right? I know that you are involved in the business, but already you take a somewhat different approach. It's usually the founders, the first generation themselves. They're the hardest nuts to crack, right? They're the most protected. And they don't really care. They say, do you know what, look, I've done quite well without talking to anyone. Why should I start talking now? And sort of they see what they achieved. Maybe they have reached an age now where they say, I'm not going to work for another 30 years. I'm already planning my exit, my retirement. I leave this to the next generation. And then, if they want to talk, let them talk. Although the matriarch might not be a big fan, but it's seldom the first generation, in Africa at least, that talks openly. In Europe, again, that's different. Or there's tech entrepreneurs, for example, or not just tech, any entrepreneur who made it, they're quite proud of their achievements. So they're typically happier to share and to talk about it.
I think you got that one right. I mean, the African founders are, yes, they don't like talking about these things. And I mean, from my experience, I think part of it has just been about it's the lack of awareness, not knowing what is out there, what is even expected of them. I think that's part of it. They're just busy building a business, and that's all it is from them, from my experience. But when we start talking, when we start sharing, because in my case, for instance, with my father, he was focused on the business. And then I started making a lot of noise about, well, family business, and there's this and there's this to be done. And now Now he's a chief advocate. I mean, he's always talking family business and talking to his mates about, oh, we need to do this and clean this up. So we're changing the narrative one day at a time, but we'll get there.
Yes, and you need a role model, you know. I mean, this is a cultural thing. Africa, now I'm generalizing, is typically more conservative, and a little more old-fashioned, perhaps, than Europe or the US is. So, you know, whether business or private life, you don't necessarily talk a lot about emotions. You know, you're not very revealing. You don't, you know, show your vulnerability or, you know, problems that you might have. And for many wealth owners, principals, business owners, it's almost a sign of weakness to talk about a challenge, you know, to open up, and then they fear that they might not be considered as someone particularly tough, you know, the tough businessman or the businesswoman. So they feel it might have almost a reputational impact on a negative side. But like with anything in life, it takes someone who takes it takes someone who needs to take the first step, right? And then the others will follow, because they will ultimately see the benefit. And I think you have nothing to lose by just talking about your business and the challenges that you might face. If anything, you will be surprised how many will approach you afterwards and say, hey, I would have not confirmed what you said in the audience, but now that it's just the two of us, actually you're right, and you know, I respect you for you know, sharing this story.
I mean, it's so true that coming back and talking to you and confirming stuff, it happens a lot. So, but I'm grateful. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I love this platform, Family Business Diaries, having those who are willing to talk about it come out and share. The others listen and they're taking notes in their bedroom, but it's good. They're still learning. And I think, I mean, summits like what you're doing, right? With the World Summit is another way where people can come out and learn, but it's not out there in the open. I mean, I think you have some really high standards that you keep when it comes to privacy and all of that. So I would encourage people to also check out David Grammig, grammigadvisory.com. Check out the summit happening in November, and let's come out and share stories and just learn. You have experts in the room. You're going to have really good people on the panels and all the discussions that are lined up. I think it'll be good for Africa. Let's change that narrative. All right. So David, just to wrap up, I think you've been very open. You've shared a lot, but one key advice for our audience as we wrap up, please.
One key advice. Oh my gosh.
Just one.
That's I wish you had asked me that before, so I could have prepared. Now I'm
from the hat. Just let it flow.
That's quite general, and that will fit to anyone. No, but I think really it goes back to what we've been talking about over the last 30, 40 minutes. Really try to build a circle of trust among peers. This is really what will get you the farthest, right? Try to learn from them. Check who you let into your circle, who can become close to you, and then discuss it relatively open and frankly, because you can only win, you know, from the experience of others. Whether it's, look at artists, right? Whether it's musicians, whether it's painters, no matter who it is, they all find inspiration in each other, in other things. But you do this by observing and by sharing through conversation. And, you know, business is a form of art, you know, you know, the more artistic and creative you are, the more successful you are. But for this, you need the stimuli, and you need to create this. I think this is really, and especially in Africa, yeah, it's make sure that you involve the kids, that you know, give them a platform, that they are involved, talk to others how they involve their kids, give them room to breathe and, you know, to grow, but you know, sort of request and require results from them also, because they're sort of typically two kind of families that I see. Either they're being very, very, very strict, and, you know, the expectations basically can't be met because it's unrealistic, or they say, look, we came from nothing, I worked so hard, I don't want to have don't want my kids to have to go through the same, and then they spoil them. And a spoiled child is the worst for your business, you know, because then they're gonna ruin it. So try to find the balance here. So that was 2 pieces of advice, I guess.
Thank you, David. You can only win from the experiences of others. Love it. Thank you very, very much, David Grammig, for joining us on the Family Business Diaries. Thank you for being so open. And yes, we look forward to your conference, to your summit happening on the 13th and 14th of November, 2024 in Mauritius. Beautiful location. So guys, check out grammigadvisory.com for all the information on the summit.
Listened to Mary, wants to see her live. No, I mean,
yes.
You are giving one of the classes, so you're a speaker. You're the very first one that I
very
announced.
first.
So
I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was like, how did I get that slot? Number one on that day one, right? So,
but very happy, very pleased to have you there, and you obviously draw from a wealth of experience from all the podcasts that you recorded, all the stories that you heard. So you are combining this now for the presumably first time into sort of a teaching and a learning experience for the families that attend. So rather than just listening, they're going to see you in action. So looking forward to it.
My team says they need to be a part of this as well. So we'll see how we get them in there. Sorry. All right, but to our audience, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Family Business Diaries. We release new episodes monthly, and you can find us on all podcast streaming platforms, as well as on our YouTube channel, Family Business Diaries. Please check out our website as well, familybusinesshub.co, and follow us on social media, Family Business Diaries, for all the behind the scenes action as well. See you on the next episode. Bye.